How are you guys doing? How is the focus? Almost the last session today, so congrats to you for making it through, for staying sharp and hungry and interested. So I'm going to challenge you today in one of the last talks of today, because we're going to be focusing on distractions and we're going to be talking about the economy of attention. My name is Monika Matuszewska. It's a Polish name for those of you who are aware. And I do come from Poland. I do live in Amsterdam, so same as the previous speaker. We share the geography, so I don't need to explain all about tulips and bicycles to you, and the weather. We'll focus on what the topic is today. Very shortly, about myself. I don't represent a big name today, so the message that I come and share with you is really a message from a human being to you as human beings. It's not a marketing message, it's maybe even an anti-marketing message. So in that sense, it's quite controversial to share to a room full of digital marketeers, to people working in tech, and people involved in all the latest news and all the latest gadgets, all the latest trends. But bear with me, because there's also trends that are kind of anti-trends, which are shaping the future. I work as a coach. So I work with people, and recently what I noticed is that more and more people come to me asking, well, I really struggle. It became even worse after the pandemic. I struggle to finish one task. I cannot read a book. I cannot keep my attention on a page. I cannot finish what I started. I don't even remember what I started. What am I actually doing? So I get these questions and I realize it's really, really an urgent and pressing topic. Before I became a coach, I worked for very big names. And some of them maybe you will recognize from all of those logos. So the first company I worked for, their slogan was very simple: think. And that's also what I encourage you to do today. I believe the thinking, the critical thinking, is something we should never, ever let go. Then I moved on, and I started creating things, making things better with sense and simplicity. After which, I was making the world a better place and making things work better, while staying at the heart of the image, creating a better everyday life for the many people, and creating the beauty that moves the world. Funny, right? How those slogans all of a sudden start sounding the same, and we're all merging to the very, very same thing. Even with the brand names and brand logos, you notice that all of them start becoming black and white and very, very similar. So yes, these are the brands that stand behind the 16 years of my professional career, and I used to present on behalf of those companies. So I find it very, very precious and very special that I have the chance to now share as a person. So the brands, yes. You might now think, is there even a common thread? They call it a red thread or a yellow thread in between all of those companies. For me, there definitely is a red thread. Dots connect when you look at them from a certain perspective. It's not a yellow thread, it's not the color of the products. For me, it was really about design, about creating a better world, about improving people's lives. And all of the brands for which I worked were very, very human-centric. Created products such as Philips that make people's home environments better, like IKEA, sustainable furniture for everyone's budget. But that was then, and this is now. So now this slide is filled with no products, no gadgets, no latest technological advancements, but with people. Just like you, sitting in chairs. This is what I do. I talk to people and I try and find out what are their struggles and how can we overcome them. This would not be a marketing presentation at a digital conference if we were not to quote or refer to Steve Jobs. So while I was preparing for the talk, I asked the question, okay, what would Steve Jobs say? If he was to talk about the attention economy, what would he say? And I came up with that. Coming from Amsterdam, never get high on your own supply. That is their message. So please don't quote me on that. I see some people taking pictures. Do not. It's not a real quote of Steve Jobs. But what Steve Jobs did say in one of the interviews he gave to The New Yorker in 2010, he said, I never ever allow my own children to play with the iPad. That was the year of launching the iPad. So that makes you wonder, how come the man who invented the thing doesn't allow his children to use it? Isn't that strange? And funnily enough, he's not the only one, because when you interview other CEOs of the Silicon Valley, they have a very, very similar, strict approach to the usage of devices. And now we can think, are they onto something? Is there something they're not saying in all the marketing message that they know? Before we had all our fancy devices, if we go back 6 centuries back, this was the latest digital, not digital, analog press. So that was the year of the Gutenberg. And it took actually 300 years until we had a next technical revolution, the telegraph. Looks very fancy, right? Then we had the photo camera, and here be careful because that is a product placement. I am still a marketeer in the heart, so that's a bit of a subliminal, not really subliminal advertising. That is a very much later model than the 1816. That one was actually from 1949, and that is a Nikon camera. That's the first mass camera that reached the mass market for everyone to carry in their pockets. All right, back to the 1829, the typewriter. Then we had the telephone. How cool, right? Then we had the radio, and here again, that's a Philips product placement. That is also a later Art Deco model of the Philips radio. And a TV, which never really hit off after the Second World War, but was invented way before. And then you might be surprised, hey, how come this is not a hardware, this is not a product, how come are you showing a magazine? But I believe that that is actually a crucial moment in the history of media. 1923, so barely 100 years ago, is the first time we as a civilization managed to circulate news at a speed of 1 week. We were never, ever able to do it as fast before. So it took us centuries between the invention of press until the first weekly newspaper. That is again a product placement, the first IBM personal computer. And then the last one I'm going to show, the iPhone, which we cannot imagine our lives with. And it's only been 15 years that the thing has existed. All right, with the invention of iPhone, all kinds of apps came, and I'm sure some of you, I'm not going to ask who, at some stage of their life has been using one of those dating apps. Everyone's now hiding. None of us, right? All right, so if you haven't ever used a dating app, the way they work, you need to swipe. And I put those little guys here. The Cookie Monster, who is representing the press officer in us. So he's the diligent one, the critical thinking, the curious one, the one who wants to know the facts and have all the information straight. And then the other one is Grog from the Moomins, representing the fear. So what kind of fear? It's really the fear of not knowing what's going to happen, not being able to prepare, not being able to predict how the change is going to influence our lives. And if I asked you which of them would you swipe left, which one would you swipe right? Most of the time I get like, I don't know. Actually, both. I do need information. I feel like I really need to know the information, be thorough, know all the facts, find out the real truth behind this all. And on the other hand, we also have a little bit of Grok in us. Grok is a funny character. Wherever she walks, she leaves a trail of ice. So she makes you freeze. That's why she's so scary. And that is what happens with fear. Fear causes us to freeze. We're not able to act. We're not able to think straight. We're not able to think logically. The 4 types of fear. Nobody likes this subject, but it is prevalent in our lives. And actually, while there are 4 types of fear, they all boil down to the very last one being the fear of death. But how does it start? How does the loop start? So first of all, there is some kind of change. And we feel like, oh, I want to stay up to speed with the news so that I know what's going to happen, so that I can prepare. Because if I don't prepare, I will lose control. So it's really the fear of unknown and not being able to prepare and be ready for the change, because that threatens our survival. So that's why from the fear of change to the fear of unknown to the fear of lost control, eventually it all boils down to the fear of death. Even though it's not a popular topic, right? We don't never really talk about that. So what do we expect from the news? What do we expect from our devices, the social media feed, the daily news fix that you get? Why do we actually watch the news? Why do we read? Why do we feel compelled to stay up to date? There's 4 needs. First of them being the need of safety. We want to feel in control, we want to feel safe. Second is we want actionable steps. We actually hope that someone who knows better than we, is better informed, is going to tell us what to do. What is the protocol in this situation? What do I need to do? What is the escape route? What are the exact instructions? The third one is the need of closure. We as human beings hate open loops. Questions that are unanswered. So, closure, we want to answer all the questions that are still circulating in our heads. And the 4th one is hope. Because we as human beings, we survived on this planet because we have hope. We do not easily give up. And that is, I believe, the most beautiful part of it all. So first, let's look at the fear and the fear-mongering. When you look at the titles, and we have a lot of marketeers here, so you will surely also notice that in the copywriting used in the news, fear is the one that sells best. People click best on the titles that sell fear. Because when we feel in danger, we want to know what's going to happen, we want to prepare so that we feel safe and in control. So how to prepare? Do we need to wear those kinds of glasses every time we open a newspaper? Do we need to not read the newspaper? I don't have the answers for you. I believe everyone has their own answers. Second, actionable steps. And here I'm going to play the advocate of the devil. Are there really actionable steps in the news that we read? How often do we get a concrete action plan? So this is happening, and this is what you as a citizen need to do. Not that often, right? But when you open and scroll through a media site, there are many call to actions, and they're all competing for your attention. The call to actions are not in the news media article. The real call to actions are hidden in the marketing messages and in the advertising around it. And very often, it really boils down to buy me, buy now. So when did the switch happen? We thought we were buying all the latest gadgets, the latest Philips TV, the latest iPhone, the latest iPad. When did it flip? How did we become a product? How did our attention become so valuable that companies are competing for our attention? When did we switch to the attention economy? I'd like to quote an audiovisual artist who's been very controversial in the 70s, and he produced an installation art titled you are the product of television. So that was an installation art, which probably today you would not enjoy because it was in the 70s aesthetics. But what Richard said was, you are the product of television. You are the product of television is the audience, and you are the product of television. You are delivered to the advertiser, who is the customer. He consumes you. You can imagine that Richard was not very popular with his message, so it never really went to the mainstream. It became more of an alternative media thing. But I hope that it also makes you think. And if you try and adopt that belief, just for a while, just for the sake of this talk, if you are the product of television, if you are the product of the social media you're using, the media sites that you're consuming, what is your price tag? What kind of price would you pay to your attention? Is that the focus? Is that not being in a state of flow? Is there a very tangible price in terms of hours, minutes, seconds, maybe years of your life? Is there other price to your relationships because you're not being able to stay fully present and you're constantly checking your phone? As I said, I bring many questions, I don't bring answers, so the answers are within you. I'd like to quote a school of life, because I believe that the modern media are actually opposed to introspection, and that is one of the prices that we pay. We are so focused on the outside world that we forget our inside world. And that is the most precious thing we have. So, the third one is the need for closure versus open loops. We want the world to be logical, we want all questions answered, but the media thrives on open loops, so we never really get the answer to a question. Most of the articles don't end with a clear answer. You need to keep checking back. The breaking news is never really providing a sense of closure. There is never really an end. The media stories get reopened, court cases get reopened. So it all becomes like a never-ending story, but not really such a light version as in the Never-Ending Story movie. I'd like to also quote something lighter, because it got very gloomy right now, and bring a message of hope, because I said hope is the most beautiful thing, the thing that keeps us alive. And Emily Dickinson said that hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. So I hope that also after the talk you will have some hope, and that you'll have some hope after seeing the numbers, because these are the current numbers. This is the price that we pay. We pay with our life. Recent statistics from this year from the US market, the number of pickups of phone per day is almost 3,000. I think this is impossible. But phones became our pacifiers. Whenever we're anxious or nervous, we start fidgeting and we touch our phone. Then 150 times unlocking the phone. 11 minutes between unlocking the phone. And you might say, nah, ridiculous. I did the very same exercise in the workshop version we had earlier on, and people actually checked their stats on the phone, and they were all shocked. Because they said, there's no way, I'm never near close to that. But some of them were way beyond. Another statistic, and that one I will maybe read a little to you, is the average time spent using social media per day. So when this constant anticipation meets infinite scrolling, the design that is a never-ending story, we end up being swallowed up and spending a tremendous amount of time on the social media. So interestingly, the country on the very left side, your right-hand side, is Japan, with just 51 minutes per day. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we have Nigeria with almost 250 minutes. So that's more than 5 times difference. You have to ask yourself, how come people have that amount of time to spend on social media? But yeah, these are just statistics. What is relevant are your numbers. So feel free to check in your own settings how much time you spend on social media. All right, now I'd like to do a little exercise. So I'd like to invite all of you to stand up. We've been sitting for a very, 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 very long time, and the task for you is to pick your poison. This is not a subliminal advertising. I never worked for Dior, but I found this visual very, very relevant to what we'll be doing now. So pick your poison and pick wisely. I'd like you to take your phone out and choose the media site that you typically go to when you're maybe in a queue, maybe you're waiting for your Uber, maybe you're stuck in a lift, the kind of news that you would fill a minute of your time while you're a little bored, the in-between times. And starting from now, you'll have just 1 minute to scroll and read. But please don't forward it, don't like, don't make a screenshot, don't place a comment. Just consume. Become the consumer. Mindlessly scrolling, being a good citizen, being up to date, keeping up with the news, being a responsible citizen. Everyone's deeply induced in their hypnosis. Time's up. That was your wake-up call. So get out of your hypnosis state and now think for yourself. First of all, did the message that you've just consumed induce the feeling of safety? Do you feel safer than you did before checking? If so, keep standing. If you don't feel safer, please sit down. Why am I not surprised? Question number 2. Did the message that you read provide actionable steps? Do you know exactly what you need to do now with that piece of information? If yes, keep standing. If no, please sit down. Number 3. Do you know everything that you need to know? Or do you need to check back for more news, another article? Is there anyone even standing still? Yes, very well, very well. Okay, so there's one person who got sense of closure. Last but not least, because hope dies last. Do you still have a sense of hope? Is there anyone still standing? Yes. Yes, 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 yes. People are still standing. Okay, guys, in the break or during the party, the rest of us, let's go and find these people. They have hope and they bring hope. They will tell us what they read and we'll all feel much better about the world. Thanks so much. Okay, everyone can sit down. So, as I said, I don't have answers, but I do encourage critical thinking and learning from your own experience. And I hope that from that short minute, you learned a lot for yourself and that you can apply these questions also in the future. So what happens when information becomes stress-formation? Because there's nothing bad, inherently bad with the news. There's nothing inherently bad with social media. There's nothing inherently bad with all of those devices. But what we are seeing is that it does cause stress. I have one very simple graph for you, which is the graph of the sweet spot, where we very, very rarely dwell. We have the concentration axis and we have the stimuli. So all the impulses that come into our world through our senses. Well, this is the boredom zone. Not enough stimuli and also very low concentration. So finally, when you study for an exam and it's a really boring topic, this is where you are. Where you're doing a really repetitive task at work, copy-paste in an Excel. This is where the boredom zone is. Then there is the focus and flow. So this is your inspiration. These are the moments when you're challenged, when you forget time, when you're completely in the zone, where you get your creative juices flowing, when you create your best work. This is where stimuli are high and concentration is also high. Stimuli are, say, medium-high, so you're not overstimulated, but it's also not a boredom zone. You need a little bit of challenge to be in the focus and the flow moment. And then the last one is, when there's too much stimuli, or they've been going on for too long, we end up in a stress zone, and then we cannot focus, we cannot think straight anymore. And I encourage you to ask yourselves during the day, and maybe also have a moment now, thinking, where do I reside? During my working day, where do I reside? Do I reside in the boredom? Do I reside in the stress? How many minutes, hours a day do I allow myself to be in the state of flow? And how do I get there? So, I don't need to explain that, Meme. We've all had those moments. We really wanted to focus on a project, and then we got an email from our boss. Now, one email is not the same as another. There are some emails that will keep you awake at night, and there are some that you just very easily can ignore. How does that happen? We are all striving for a balance or harmony, as one of the speakers before said, and I really love that reframing. There is no such thing as balance, but harmony definitely exists and is an ideal to strive for. When it comes to digital media, we find ourselves bouncing between the two. So there's the fasting and binging. And it really is a balancing exercise. I want to talk about one trend, which is, funnily enough, hitting the internet, and the influencers are endorsing it, even though it's an anti-social media trend. So that's about dopamine fasting and social media detox. And I have a question of you, because maybe you've also already been infected by that trend. Have any of you ever deleted a social media app from their phone? By the show of hands, yeah? Yeah. Okay, the power of influence. Yeah. It's becoming more and more of a trend, especially after the pandemic. It was just too much of a digital life that people started to massively delete their apps. But the next question is, of course, okay, which app? Which one got to you so badly that you actually realized that you were better off without it? And the last question is, how long did it take you to install it back on? Because that is also what we see, that very often people have good New Year resolutions. They say, I'm going to be more focused, I'm not going to be spending time on Instagram, on Facebook, TikTok, and the likes. But after a week, their willpower is just too weak, and they install it back on. They feel they've been missing out, and they need to be part of it. So these are just the last few stats. They're from the UK, and they're also very recent. The social media detox is definitely a trend, and it's the trend that also digital marketeers need to really take into consideration. It hits mainly the Generation Z and millennials primarily. What we see is there's a few interesting differences when it comes to demographics. Interestingly enough, men much more easily stick to the resolution to delete the app. Women, when they delete them, they are much more easily triggered to reinstall it. So men are their choices are more permanent in that sense. And most likely we also see that it's prevalent amongst the millennials. For Generation Z, it's a little more tricky. Apparently their lives are just so so dependent on social media that it's quite difficult for them to, to deal without it, and they're not so prone to that trend. Now you might be asking yourself, okay, what is the message of that? Do I need to uninstall my social media? This is not the message that I'm bringing. I'm not bringing the message that you should stop watching news or uninstall social media, but think. So, questions and answers. Successful people ask better questions, and as a result, they get better answers. That's Tony Robbins, one of the, I think, most known personal development motivational speakers. I hope that I pose some questions that you'll continue discussing with your colleagues at work, with your family members at the family dinner, with your loved ones as well. And the questions that I would like to leave you with, first of all, am I getting high on my own supply? Second, do my messages induce more fear or more hope? What kind of messages do I want to share with the world? If you're a marketeer, of course you'll have a different angle, but even if you're not, you are sharing messages, you are forwarding things. What kind of stuff do you want to share with your family and friends? Third, do my messages fulfill my audience's need for safety? Do the recipients feel more safe after reading my message? Do I provide actionable steps? Are people just anxious and confused and worried after reading my message? Or do they feel like, okay, I know what I need to do, I got this? And last, is there a sense of closure? And with that, I would like to close this talk with one of my favorite movies being The Truman Show, and that is the exit scene when Truman found out that he was just part of a large, big experiment and a movie set, and he finds the door at the very end of the stage, and he exits the scene. I believe and I deeply trust that all of you have the wisdom in yourself to discover the right answers to those questions and to all the other life questions. And it's been a privilege for me to be able to speak to this audience. Thank you very much.